I'm Nick Hughes, and this is Founders Live Conversations.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Founders Live Conversations. Welcome to tonight. I'm so excited to get going here. I'm so excited to have Tys Stiklorius to join us for Founders Live Conversations. Tonight we have such a special event, and I'm so excited for you all to join us. And before we get started, I want to walk through a couple things to introduce me and Founders Live to you. You might not be aware of Founders Live. So I am Nick Hughes. I am the CEO and founder of Founders Live. Founders Live is a global marketplace connecting entrepreneurs to people, resources, capital, and global exposure they need for success. As a global venue, we have presence in 5 of the 7 continents. We help founders earn recognition, taste fame, establish their business, truly connect with other entrepreneurs, become rock stars, and uniquely reach audiences around the world. So we're in for an incredible night, an incredible conversation. But first, I want to make a couple acknowledgments to thank some people and the team that has helped put this together. So I want to thank our Founders Live team. You all know who you are. I want to thank you so much. And I also want to thank everyone who was able to make this happen. Truly, it takes a village and it takes a team to put this together. And there's been some amazing people doing amazing things to really help make this night special. Secondly, I want to thank Women in Cloud for their partnership with Founders Live. And, we are a proud partner with Women in Cloud. They are a community-led economic development organization with a massive mission to take action with global leaders, corporations, and policymakers to help women entrepreneurs create 1 billion or more economic access and opportunity by 2030. Founders Life supports their mission and works alongside them to open more opportunities for women entrepreneurs around the world. We have one just tonight that we will hear from, and so excited for that. Also, I want to cover our core values. As this is a Founders Live event, I want to share with you our core values that are important, and we should respect them as we're going through this experience. First and foremost is respectful authenticity. And this core value is actually really around what we're starting to talk about is entrepreneurial equality. And what does that mean? That means no matter where you are in the world, no matter who you are, what you look like, what language you speak, or how you identify, you absolutely deserve equal opportunity to be successful. And that's what Founders Live is about. Also, just respecting others and everyone in their own unique self is 100% what we believe in. Secondly, gather around the campfire. Look, we're telling stories. We're storytellers. And you as an entrepreneur, understanding how to craft your story and entertain people so they can follow you in your business and in your journey to make impact around the world. So we say gather around your campfire. Thirdly, open the door. This one's incredibly important for me, and this night is definitely a result of doors being opened. So we ask you to do great things for people without expecting a return. Help someone, open the door, make an introduction. We ask you to do that simply because it's a great community and one that we want to be a part of. And if you do that, it will come back to you hundredfold, trust me. And last one, business equals fun. We simply say that we believe that by building business and actually we think that business can and should be fun, should be enjoyable, and creating in an atmosphere where people are encouraged and they feel accepted. That is what business is all about. So I want to share that with you. A couple things real quick. We ask for your participation. Hey, this is awesome. This is Founders Live. We want your participation. So comment, make comments in the chat there. Cheer if you can. Share that. Click those hearts or love or like the page. And then we're gonna take some questions at the end. We're excited to bring up some of your questions. Ty and I are gonna have a great conversation here for a while, and then we'll start addressing some questions later in the conversation. So please hold them now, because we don't want to go back and try to find those. We want to get your questions at the end of this conversation, and we'll start to do that, okay? And then last, one thing we want to mention too is we're going to open a room to hang out afterwards to talk. It'll actually be on Kumo Space. We're really excited about that. But just know that we're going to open a room, and that will be an ability for us to all kind of connect on camera if we want. So hang out for that afterwards. That'll be about 8 p.m. Pacific time. I don't know where you are. This might be morning for you, tomorrow morning to us over here on the West Coast. So if you can hang out, that would be great. And also, please like this page. Like this page, share it. We want to get more people in here. We want to get this exposure, and we would love to have that. So if you can like this page, share it out. That will help us tremendously. All right. Are you ready? I'm so excited. I'm so excited to introduce the guest of the night. And, I want to introduce Tys Stiklorius, who is the founder and CEO of Friends at Work, a talent management and entertainment and social impact company that partners with leading creators, influencers, brands to elevate important voices and help their vision thrive. Founded in 2015, LA-based Friends at Work supports the careers of artists, including John Legend, Lindsey Stirling, Raphael Saadiq, among many others. Friends at Work also partners with corporations, individuals, and social impact strategy, business development, and creative storytelling and production. And I can tell you, boy, this is going to be an amazing conversation. I'm really excited to bring in Ty, and when she is ready, I'm going to pop her on stage. Ty, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. That was really cool to hear your core values and principles. One of them aligns with my Quaker background. That one about doing something for others.
These are important.
Song. They're so important, and I wish we had more of that in business, like being generous and really compassionate and vulnerable. But that one specifically, I grew up with a song from the time I was like a little kid that we always sang. You may know it. Some of you may know it. It's like, love is something if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. And it goes on about the shiny penny. If you hold it tight, you won't have any. But if you lend it, you'll have so many they'll roll all over the floor. And it is really, I think, it is a core value that we should all have. And I think, especially in entrepreneurship, because how you help others and how you connect with each other, it comes back tenfold for you. So I love that you have that, and I love that you started with that. That's really cool.
Oh, well, thank you. And, honestly, that's, amongst other things, it's, I think, why we're spreading around the world is entrepreneurs and people in general are, we've built this as, it's a human trait to be creative and entrepreneurial. It's a human trait. It's not American. It's not any other country. And when you look at those core values, they're really just about treating people well and giving first and all that. And we're going to talk about some of that. But what I would like to do, Ty, is I would like to open this with, what we want to say in terms of we want to find out who Ty is. But what I would like you to take the angle on is, why do you think you've been placed in this moment influencing such highly influential people? That's the area that I would like to start with. So tell us a little bit more about yourself in that context.
Well, I'm not even really sure where to start. I mean, that's such a cool question. Part of it is just that I have done what I do for a long time, and I've built a lot of trust with artists and influencers, and I think first and foremost, that's what this job is about. If you're influencing really, people with a giant megaphone that influence millions and millions of people, those people need an infrastructure behind them that helps determine the strategy, the alter, so that we don't get stuck on any alternative. And they need a caring, safe, smart, efficient team that executes day in and day out, that can take the call and represent. They need people that know them inside and out. I mean, management is a really intimate kind of relationship. But I mean, I can start all the way back at the beginning of the story if you want. I do think that helps kind of explain how I got into this position. Because,
Well,
you know,
yeah, what I would like is to take the angle of how did your upbringing influence your worldview and even how you are working with these individuals today?
sure. So I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And I went to a Quaker friends school. I was a city kid, a latchkey kid in the city, and I took a subway and a bus to go all the way out to this private school in the main line. But I went there because when my dad first came to America as an immigrant, he left and they fled Lithuania, um, and then lived in a displaced persons camp. They were refugees and they came to this country. They, didn't have anything when they came to America, but my dad ended up getting a scholarship to this Quaker school, the same school that I went to. So my dad insisted on us going there, even though it was so far away from where I lived. But that school really shaped me. I mean, I went there from 1st through 12th grade, and part of the Quaker philosophy is that there's a light within everyone and that there is no hierarchy, really, that we all have something to give. And we were graded on concern for the community. So every week we were proximate to some part of the community that needed our help. And that kind of helped me create, I think, without even knowing it, a practice of altruism where you just, like any other good practice, working out, meditating, you just get into the flow and the practice of it, and then it's just part of what you do and who you are. And a lot of people, I think, want to wait to give back or get involved until they have a lot of money or until they're Bill Gates one day. And I think altruism should not be delayed. It's a practice that you need to engender and work on from the time you're young. And that Quaker school that I went to was like that. And so I grew up in this city, in this vibrant music community. I was always a musician. I sang in every musical, every singing group. From the time I was a kid, I sang in choir, and I just loved music. It was one of my passions. And when I went to college, I went to Penn, another Quaker school, University of Pennsylvania in Philly. And I decided to join a jazz and blues a cappella group called Counterparts. And I got in freshman year, and I was so excited to be a part of that group. And a few years into it, I became the president of the group. And we had, the new recruits coming from freshman year. And one of them was a young man named John Stevens, who was 16 years old at the time. He was very young for being a freshman in college. And John Stevens later in life became John Legend. And while we were in college, John became the music director of the group, and he had the best voice any of us had ever heard. And so we kind of worked together managing the singing group as kids. I mean, we had a P&L, we had gigs, we had to lead, we had to get rehearsals set, we had to make sure we had a spring break for the whole group. So that was kind of my early practice in management, in music management, was really running and managing a music singing group. And John Legend was by far the most talented artist. And we all thought at the time in college, if anybody ever makes it in the music business against all odds, it'll be John Legend or John Stevens, who then became.
Yeah, and I want to jump in there and what does talent look like at that early stages? What did you, outside of just the great voice? I mean, what did you see in him, or even maybe some others that you were around? What does talent look like when it's not polished?
Honestly, the thing about great talent is there's the ability, whatever that is, playing an instrument incredibly well. John had an exceptional voice, but the thing about him is he had this real discipline, and he was always on time. He was, it didn't matter where we were, what situation. He was never sort of seemed nervous. He could always get up there and do it. And he was consistent and he was excellent every single time. And I think that, from knowing a lot of great talent, that is kind of one of the conditions. Even when you're not famous, even when nobody signed you yet, that you just know you're so good and you're always going to show up and give, 110 and just be your best. And that was what John was like. He just was that member of the group that was always willing to step up, lead. We were in a national a cappella competition, and we were in the finals, and the finals were at Carnegie Hall. And it was crazy because there were like busloads of kids coming from colleges if we were like a football game. And we performed in Carnegie Hall, and we only got to do one song, but John was the lead singer of that particular song because we just knew he was going to kill it. And he always does, and he always did, and he still does to this day. And he's really one of the hardest working people I've ever known, consistently throughout his whole life. If anything, like as his management, we need to tell him sometimes to like take a break. But he's just that guy that will always show up and do his best. And you can count on him for that. So that was one of the things. I mean, another was that he just had such a huge compassionate heart. So even in college, he was the one giving books like The End of Poverty by Professor Sachs to all of his friends to read. And he volunteered his time in a number of nonprofit organizations. And he taught the gospel choir of a church in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And even though it was like 2.5, 3 hours away, every Sunday he would drive from Philly all the way out to Scranton to lead this gospel choir for 4 years while he was in college. So he was kind of unstoppable, and you knew it back then. Although he was way more shy back then. I remember meeting him and being like, "You're hard to get to know." But it took time to build trust and to become his friend. But once we had that friendship, it kind of never went away. Even after college, we always stayed in touch. We talked to each other about our jobs. He worked at Boston Consulting Group after Penn. I worked at LA Consulting. I went back and got my MBA. And we always debated sort of how do we keep our artistry and try to bet on ourselves as artists and entrepreneurs, but also make sure we understand the way the world works and get some really good professional experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and what leads me to, so that was early. It's like, okay, he's got an amazing voice and actually an amazing heart, but how does one, whether it John Legend or not, if there's a tremendous talent in this individual, in terms of potential talent, how does someone take that and hone it into this amazingly unique and special gift that can be experienced on a global stage? Because it's one thing to have talent, but we all know people that just didn't make it or didn't apply themselves, didn't take care of themselves, and kind of spun out of control. How does someone hone that to take to the next level?
I mean, in a way, it takes it's a tough bit of advice to give, because there can be someone who has talent, but they're slightly delusional, and they're not. Maybe they keep working on it, they keep working on it, they keep working on it, and they stick with it, but it never. Part of it really is luck. Like I know some of the most talented people who moved to LA, who went to Yale Drama School, and a lot of their friends ended up in movies and film, but they just never got that lucky break. So I can't honestly say there's like one formula, but with John and others that I know, it is sort of that belief in self that even when you hear no, which he did over and over and over again. I mean, he had like 10 labels say like, pass, we're not signing you. Even when he quit his really big consulting job that was super lucrative, it's like years after that, he may have doubted himself. He may have thought like, why did I leave that thing? Because I haven't made it yet in music. But he kind of had this unwavering confidence that he was just going to keep going for it. And then one day he got signed, and then one day he put out an album, and that did well. And then he really could always envision and manifest. Even when he was a young kid, actually, I think he was like 13 or 14, and he wrote an essay in this local competition. And the essay was sort of like, how are you going to live up to Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy? And what will you do for your community? And in the essay, he says, I'm going to become a famous musician, and I'm going to use my platform to help my community and to give back. I'm going to use my power and my platform to make sure that I empower other people and that I solve some of the world's biggest problems. Wow. And he had that vision even really early on, when we whiteboarded about what we could potentially do together. He really had a clarity of what he was trying to achieve, a real sense of his purpose in life. But, you know, there is some great talent that crumbles under the weight of it. There's great talent that gets there too fast, that doesn't learn the steps along the way. There's great talent that self-sabotages. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that great talent cannot go the distance. It is a very, very rare thing for someone to have a career like what John's had, where, you know, 15, 20 years into it, he's having bigger moments than when he started. So, you know, and that's a combination of talent, persistence, focus, but also I would argue having a really great infrastructure and team that helps make that happen and takes risks and has trust and isn't afraid to sort of think out of the box of the industry that tries to kind of keep you in the norm. And, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, society, certain things in general try to keep your power in check. But John and his team, you know, just always took risks, tried new things, decided like, I don't need to just stay in the lane of music. I'm going to go produce film and television. I'm going to be Jesus and Jesus Christ Superstar on NBC. I'm going to invest in theater and win a Tony Award. I'm going to start a nonprofit that's trying to end mass incarceration and work in criminal justice reform, even when it wasn't sexy and nobody even knew that we were the most incarcerated country in the world. He just has always kind of stayed true to, and we have as his team, we've always stayed true to kind of like a lot of those same goals and practices that you have. Like, let's do right by the world. Let's use our platform to do good. And let's have fun, and let's never get like so scared of losing something that we don't try to just keep having creative innovation.
Yeah.
So, and we just don't. We never felt like we had to do it the way that it was done. You know, if John was like that, if he led with fear, I wouldn't be his manager, because there were no women managers. There were so few, if any, women managers, and certainly not ones that were empowered. There were often women working behind the scenes managing an artist, but the reputation and the sort of it all went to a guy, you know, at the top.
Yeah.
And there were very few men who were empowered to be like the best managers. And, you know, somehow because of good work and trust, John through the years really empowered me and said, "You're my manager." Even when I would walk in rooms and, you know, back then there was so much unconscious bias. And there still is, but there's so much unconscious bias that people would they'd see me in the room, they'd be like, "Oh, are you his assistant? Are you his publicist?" Because women were always assistants or publicists. Yeah. And so I had to really fight to be seen as a legitimate manager. And then eventually I got to be the older woman in the room, and I'd stuck around for so long. People were like, I guess she's really doing this. I guess that's who she is. I guess that's what she is. But, you know, 10, 15 years ago, that was not the norm. And it was tough. I got to say, I was definitely not I was humbled and knocked off my platform over and over again. Because it didn't matter that I had a MBA. It didn't matter that I graduated cum laude. It didn't matter that I understood things. I had professional jobs. In the music business, it's kind of like who you know, and it's not exactly a meritocracy in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, you know, you mentioned earlier, and I want to take the route of really alignment with the people you want to work with, and how you're choosing the artists and the clients and musicians, however you say that, how do you know when there's alignment? Is it just one of those, when you know? Or how do you know when you have, is there energy, signs, just a connection? Tell us about that in terms of what you look for.
I've learned a lot through the years. I used to just look for someone that I clicked with, and then I'd fall in love really quick and we'd start working together. And oftentimes that was not a recipe for success. Now I know that it takes a good amount of crawling and then walking and then running to see if we're a good fit. And it is nice when you own your own company to put up your own sort of boundaries and criteria. But I wouldn't say that I have a checklist that we go through. We tried that, and it's just too rigid for my taste. So it is a mix of kind of it's a mix of gut and testing the waters, and also just being very selective. And seeing if we align with our values. And one thing now, I used to be afraid to say things that like would maybe not get me the client, but now I'm very clear. Like, I have 2 kids. A lot of the women in my company, and we're mostly women, have families and are the sort of breadwinners in their families. So if you need a manager who's there with you 24/7, on the road with you everywhere you go, holding your hand, taking phone calls at 2 a.m. to tell you whether your eyebrows look good or not, we're not your team. We're the smartest, most strategic, but we'll be balancing our lives and living our best lives too. This isn't a client services step all over us kind of thing. And I've found that the more you hold your own value like that, the better the relationship is. Because the old school, there's an old school sort of vibe of management too, that it's just like, what have you done for me lately? And you should be a sort of combination of assistant, peon, and so we fought hard to make our role more like a partnership. And artists partners. Artists know that if they partner with us, they're going to have an incredible infrastructure around them. We have a 40-person team, and the kindest, smartest people that will help lift your voice and your intentions. But so for me, I try to sort of suss out, like, what is it that this artist is like hoping for, and how do they treat people, and do they have a bigger aim than just getting another pop hit on the radio? And if they do,
sorry to jump in, but you seem to deeply care about their legacies. You seem to deeply care about what is important to them. I would assume that that's maybe not the norm in the industry. Maybe I'm wrong, but why is it so important to you that their legacies and their impact, you can be a part of that, but it seems like that's what you go towards as you're looking at who you'd want to work with?
Anything less than that is just fast food. It's too transactional. It's not meaningful. I also find that it's really helpful for an artist, especially if they're younger in their career arc, to have a deeper sense of purpose that keeps them grounded. Because if their second album is a sophomore slump and they think they're over, they know that they aren't, and that they have a deeper purpose. And it's not just about, it's not just about getting the biggest songs on the radio all the time. You have a lot of influence as an artist. You have millions of people that follow you, or tens of thousands or thousands, whatever level you're at. You have a chance as an artist to spread your vision for the world. And it's not just about pleasing other people. I mean, generally, it's a criteria for me, and it matters because it leads to having the best clients, like the best artist partners, and making the most impact and doing the best in the world. It's the most rewarding. I mean, it's not some selfless aim. It's truly the most rewarding part of the job. And I've been lucky enough to partner with John, who you never had to convince him. That's just who he was. So I was kind of spoiled. I mean, once I saw how well John could do it, when other artists weren't up for the task, I was confused. I was like, well, why would you not want to do that? Now, oftentimes that can be that the artist is just intimidated. They didn't go to pen, and they don't think that they don't really even understand the complexity of a particular issue. But that's when I tell them, like, nobody does at first. I mean, and John and I made tons of mistakes in our early philanthropy. But you don't delay your altruism. You get started and you start practicing, and every week you read something new and you try to understand what are the issues that matter to you: the environment, mental health, women's rights, whatever it is. You can make a really big difference, and it will keep you grounded as an artist. And it just makes everybody around you, it fills your goodwill bucket. I like to talk about that too. Like, as an artist or as anybody, just keep filling your goodwill bucket, because, you know, that will come back. If you believe in karma, or if you believe in just like doing good things, comes back to you. It really, really does help. And you can tell when there's a dysfunction of narcissistic personality disorder. Not everybody likes to subscribe to labels and names like that, but I do find it helpful after having read a lot of books about narcissism. It's not that somebody's like self-centered. People misunderstand narcissism. They think it's just like, oh, that person's so self-centered. Really, it's just someone who had a ton of trauma in their youth, and they developed a technique for feeling less pain and suffering. And they fill that sort of hole in that pain and that trauma by being sort of delusional about how great they are. And they find a very soothing technique of like saying, like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, I'm the, you know, and you know, when you see that kind of spiral into that type of behavior, it can be really useful for a famous musician or a president. But it doesn't lead to the best sort of behavior and actions, especially not for the people around you or the people that you influence. So I'm very mindful of whether this person is healthy, mentally well, and if they're willing to do the work that it takes to really be a grounded individual who's conscious. There's a lot of artists I absolutely love from a distance, and I know enough now to sort of tame my own narcissism, to not just believe that if I'm their manager, that somehow I'm going to change them and heal them and make them into a good person. So I have tried that before too. It's a lot of trial and error, but you know, you get to know what the red flags are and things, and you know, and sometimes you break those rules and you just find someone because you can't not. You know, I mean, that's another thing about my team. Like, someone comes to me who's a manager on my team and they're like, I have to sign this act. I must manage this artist. Like, that kind of passion, if you're ready to sort of jump up and down on the table, like, okay, go manage that artist. Like, great. Because it does take that kind of commitment and passion from the manager as well. So, you know, we're still figuring it out every single time we sign somebody new. We just signed Salt and Peppa. I love these women. They're in their 50s. They're, you know, I grew up on their music, and they have a real need for great management. And it was such an honor to kind of work with them as they built more of their legacy years, but also to fight for them in the business to get more recognition. A lot of the music business just puts women after a certain age out to pasture. They don't think about them anymore. They don't hire them enough. They don't think about whether they should be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It is still a very male-dominated, unconscious bias business. And so for me to kind of think about ways that we can constantly improve what we are and offer archetypes of, you know, what you can be to young women. Like, I want young women in rap to get in and think like, wow, it's going to be great when I'm in my 50s. It shouldn't be something that just churns through people like we're commodities. And so I'm very protective of artists, and the ones that we get behind, you know, I want to be with them and see them in their 70s still thriving and doing well. Yeah. When there's way too many examples in music of artists just ending up with nothing, being exploited, not having their masters or their publishing, having a manager that they're still paying into perpetuity forever. I mean, the contracts of yesterday are awful, and you have to right the wrongs of all of that. So, I mean, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but
a lot of stuff there, though. This is amazing. I mean, there's like 5 roads we could go, but the narcissism really did jump because we all we all deal with people in this way, and whether it's entertainment, political, our industry is business and entrepreneurship. Clearly, leadership and CEOs and founders can be that way as well, and we all have it inside us, right? So
Yeah.
how can we create an environment to mitigate this or deal with it? Like, I think we need not just when we have like help with like understanding racism, and we're going through that process of how we can become better as a society and organizations around the equity in that, but also dealing with personalities and emotion. How can we deal with this, or do you have any answers on that?
Well, I found it helpful to read a little bit about, not just a little bit, a lot. I kind of went down a rabbit hole of trying to understand extreme narcissism, and just in general, sort of what is that and why is it around? Again, you can get caught in definitions, and some people who advise me really don't even like the word. But I really enjoyed a book called Rethinking Narcissism by Dr. Craig Malkin, because it kind of puts it on a spectrum. We all have a certain degree of healthy or unhealthy narcissism, from zero being like you don't have any faith or understanding of self, all the way to 10 where it's sort of sociopathic and how little empathy you have for others. And it just was a helpful framework in understanding kind of when and how to check, especially in the entertainment business, because I think anything where you're sort of anybody gets to a certain place and they're being constantly enabled, and people are afraid to say no, or that's not right, or don't do that. And I've been in those situations. I mean, I've managed severe addicts, people who are deeply wounded as children. So I have a lot of compassion for it. I just know enough now to sort of see the signals and the signs and stay further away from it. But I do think it's a uniquely much more American thing too, because this country's sort of always been about like pull yourself up from your bootstraps and succeed in this very individualistic way, and that you get all the praise if you do that. And I think entrepreneurs have a lot of that too. I think sometimes, I was at this sort of gathering with a bunch of very successful Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and leaders, and mostly in tech. And Eric Schmidt, who is the chairman of Google, he was talking about this was like 7 years ago, maybe, or 6 years ago. He was talking about the profile of who he likes to invest in. And it was sort of a foregone conclusion. He was like, well, you guys know the people we invest in. And this was a lot of VCs, very successful billionaires. The kind of guy like Travis Kalanick of Uber, who is going to drive a Mack truck across the center divide of the highway to get you to where you need to be. And I just remember like my jaw falling to the floor. I was like, that's who we invest in? But the reasoning was because those guys will stop at nothing to be successful. And they were kind of patting each other in the back about that. Like, that's who we should invest in. And oftentimes it was even like someone who they would diagnose as being on the spectrum with, potentially like a limited social, and so the way he described it, I was so surprised. I was like, oh, that's who they invest in. And they've been investing in that, and they've seen that that's who has the highest level of profit and revenue and can overcome any obstacle, because in essence, they're saying they have no conscience. And so they will do whatever it takes to win. And therefore you will have the highest returns on your investment. And I think that, what are you gonna say?
And I just want to stay right here. This is us diving deep. So this is why, basically, the fundamental reason why Founders Live is what was created, is in the world, and will spread everywhere, because we are coming full strength to bring the world to understand that's not only in my opinion, the wrong way to invest, but quite frankly, there's many negative consequences from that we're only seeing now. And that's from like Capitalism, which we can talk about. But I just want to go into like pattern matching, because basically that's what Eric was doing. It's pattern matching, and they say we look for this and this type of person that we want to invest in. Usually, it turns out to be the male pronoun. They need to be technical. Turns out that's a male pronoun, and then they need to be introduced to us. So we need a warm introduction. And look, 99.9% of the people in this world don't fit that. But you know how there's like talent everywhere? There's freaking talent in every single city, in every single country, and around the world. That's what we're about. That's what we're about in terms of entrepreneurial activity and creativity. But I'm guessing that you use an example of Eric in technology, but you probably see that in your industry too, where they're looking for one prototype of an individual that sings, looks beautiful, or somehow like fits this mold. So how do you? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going off here, but I'm
I love
curious.
this.
Like,
We're hitting
yeah,
on the crux of it all. I mean,
yeah,
I think somebody said, and maybe the last talk you were on with me was talent is equally distributed,
yeah,
just not equally empowered or something like that. I think, I mean, I've been told in the music business, like when I was working with different artists, like I've been told by label heads, and you know how few labels there are, especially the majors. There's so few major labels. And I've been told by A&R that like, oh, sorry, we can't sign a Black woman artist right now. That's just not selling. That just doesn't work. Like, or, oftentimes women were told, and I managed Alanis Morissette for a bit. And, she was big on alt radio back in the day. And then at a certain point, alt radio just stopped playing women. And I've heard this from a bunch of women who are in a particular genre. And, to this day, there's sort of these very few empowered people, gatekeepers in the music business, who kind of got away with, I think, defining who got to cut the line and get to the top. I mean, now I like to think that because distribution has really opened up and artists can put their music up on streaming platforms and create their own fan bases and win on TikTok, that it's not as bad as it used to be. But there are still all sorts of biases and expectations, and what wins is kind of what kind of gets all the way to the top. I don't think there's a lot of consciousness from executives or even radio programmers about like, let's think about what we're doing. That's sort of, let's think about, can we play 50% of the songs on the radio? Can we make a pledge to say it's gender balanced? Can we make a pledge to think about who we're promoting? And we've asked for those types of pledges, and we rarely get them. And I think we have a long way to go in the music business towards people being conscious of how promoting one thing just continues to sort of keep the norm. I think we're not as innovative with who we're letting be. I mean, now I just think everything sounds so much the same on radio. I mean, back in the day when I was growing up, like pop radio was much more interesting and like different, but there's sort of this algorithm now that kind of keeps it all in a similar vein. And now I could sound like the old lady in the room that's just like, back in my day, music was just more like I get that, like I don't hear and see everything. But I wish that there was, I remember when I was managing Alanis, I looked at the Spotify 90s rock playlist. They had those like different eras, and it was like 90s rock. And I pulled it up and I counted every song. There was like 130 songs or something like that. And there were only 6 songs by women in that list. 90s
wow.
rock, the entire title of it, only had 6 songs, and Alanis was not even in it. And she had the biggest female rock album of all time. So that was weird. And I wondered, how did that list get made? Was it an intern? Was it one person saying like 90s rock is Soundgarden and Nirvana and all of these male acts. I mean, it even had some really obscure male acts in it that I thought were like, how's that in here? It did have like one L7 and one, it had some Liz, I think it did have one Liz Fair, but to me, 90s rock is like mostly all women. So I wasn't sure how they were figuring that out, but I don't think it was based on anything that was taking into account gender.
Well, and how, because you've spoken before about even talking to Daniel at Spotify and even bringing this stuff up, which is like, hey, what's the deal with the algorithm here? And so our cultural tastes and experiences are more and more determined and brought to us by algorithms. And if these things aren't looked at, policed in some way, or at least understood, like this is not a great direction. Even though, look, I listen to more music than I ever have, right? Am I buying more music than I ever have? No, because there's many more ways that I can engage with it that I'm actually not purchasing it. And then what is being brought to me is based on some historical things. So, like, the amount of discovery of new artists is happening. We're listening to more music than we ever have, but yet the money distribution is challenging, as well as the algorithms are not surfacing a variety and a diversity of artists. How do we change that?
Yeah, I do think I was barking so much about this. I do think Spotify has changed it because I can't find that same 90s playlist anymore, although they did create a whole line of women in the 90s. Women in 90s rock was its own awesome playlist. So sometimes the way it's solved is to just create the women's playlist, the women in rock 90s playlist. And then it's like, you don't have to worry about it. But I do think, we think about this when it comes to criminal justice reform, because there's a lot of algorithms being used in recognition of who might bail and sort of bail and determining who deserves bail at what level. And it's all done through these algorithms that are based on past input and data that was already racially compromised and biased in the first place. So, I'm not a big fan of thinking that machine learning is going to get us to a better place. I do think that, like, similar to what we've done in Hollywood, certain production companies have made a pledge to say we will hire and work with women directors, we will hire and work with directors of color. You set the pledge and the rules so that you're living up to the standard of offering opportunity and equal playing field to everyone. And I think if radio did that, it would be monumental. And if Spotify did that to a certain extent, and Apple and all, there's still so many gatekeepers. I mean, I don't know how MTV did it back in the day, but wouldn't it have been nice to know that the playlist for music videos that launched so many careers was thinking about gender and race and trying to balance it out? I think opportunity, this sort of land of opportunity and the American dream, I grew up with the true example of it. My dad came to this country with nothing, and he got into the Navy, ROTC, and he got a scholarship to Penn Central and then to Penn, and then he became a businessman, and he lived the example of the American dream. But I realized in high school that because he was a very handsome, tall, white European man, it was more possible for him than it was for a lot of my friends growing up in Philly who just weren't seen as somebody who could be let into the stockbroker world of Wall Street, for example. Yeah. And so, I believed in the American dream. And then I saw poked all the holes and saw all the places where it wasn't available to so many people and still isn't. And it's this sort of delusional idea that we have to try to constantly live up to if we can, but we've got to look at where it's not working and who it's not working for. And in the music business, and I mean, just for management, there's so few women in management. So the way I fix it is if I can have a little bit of power in my own company, I'm going to hire, as many women and people of color and I'm just going to think about how do we make our company as diverse as we want it to be. and then empower those people, and not just empower them with good jobs and titles, but actually give them really great salaries that are more than they make elsewhere, and then also a piece of the back end, so that if they're managing that client and they sign that client and they're working with them, that they get a cut of the commission, and that we be sort of more transparent about that and make sure that we're not just sort of rolling through employees and having high turnover. That's taken me, that's taken me a lot of time and effort to realize that, like, if you're going to do that, you're not going to be the manager at the top with 7 mansions. You're not going to be the manager at the top with 5 Bentleys and extra money to invest in all sorts of tech. But you are going to be able to make a number of talented future managers and employees and people and families like thrive. And I love these CEOs who I've heard about who make this pledge to like keep their compensation down to like a reasonable level, and make sure, because where is all the money going, right? I mean, where is all that money that Amazon has made gone? And I mean, nobody needs that level of money. And if Bezos can have that level of, that many billions, surely the company can afford to provide healthcare and benefits and high wages. And so I'm a big fan of just I feel more satisfied if I know that everybody around me is doing well. And I wish that was more of a value. It's not, you shouldn't be proud of winning everything and holding all the toys. It's not something to be like promoting or thinking is like, ooh, you're the best entrepreneur. You made the most billions of dollars. Because where did that money come from?
Yeah, and I think like when you look at one of the thoughts that it's come to me not only in this conversation but recently is capitalism, at its extreme is a very net. It tends to be. It looks like it's a net negative on our society. And going back to previous thoughts on algorithms on Spotify, there's only one reason that's happening. There's one reason whatsoever. The platform that we're streaming on right now and other social platforms, there's a reason they do things, right? And so when you look at the ultimate drive for more and more profits is becoming a net negative on our emotions, on our life. How can we pull back, or can we pull back to a more purposeful, impactful capitalism? Is that possible?
Well, it's a great question. I think about this all the time. This is Rosie, by the way. I told everybody on Twitter to bring their cat. If you brought your cat, pet your cat on your lap right now, because this is a good conversation to have a little like comfort with. I'm not sure that capitalism is going to survive or work. I mean, look at how damaging it has been in so many ways. And just because, my dad fled Lithuania because the Soviet Union occupied it. And so I grew up with a father who was like, anything less than full-on capitalism is a slippery slope to evil. People in Europe really understand the complexity and the definition of socialism. I don't think anybody in America has ever even been taught what that means. Socialism is such a dirty word here. It's really weird. Although I think it's changing. I think a lot of young people, obviously because of Bernie and AOC, and hopefully they're reading good books, they're learning more and more about it. But I'm not sure that we can just keep calling it capitalism and holding true to sort of this milk and maximize profit manifesto of greed that was really launched on the world in the 80s. Launched on the world, and specifically in America, and then in our governments. I learned this all in business school. We only had one ethics class at Wharton. And nobody really took it seriously. And this was during the time of Enron, when we saw so many big companies collapsing because of this, almost like an ethos of sociopathy, like just like really sick companies that were being so greedy that they completely destroyed so many people's lives. We see it every day. We see it in every walk of life in this country. And it needs to be regulated because we deregulated so much that we've let so many awful behaviors and greed just take over. And I don't know whether we can adjust. I do know that this will not last for long. And that the way we need to take care of people is, just look at what capitalism has done to the environment. If we don't fix kind of how awry we've gone with deregulation, with maximizing profit, with harming, workers, we're not going to survive. And I don't really know what goes from here. So that kind of stuff obviously keeps me up at night. And I think we're all reading more books than we ever have on like what's a better model. I've heard from some brilliant economists new perspectives and models that are coming up with names like market humanism, something that is maybe in a space where socialism doesn't frighten people and capitalism isn't completely abandoned. But again, how you think of these words and these definitions really is politically, the things that I actually believe have a harder time getting through politics and getting through Congress. And so I think it's going to take quite a bit of time, or we're just going to have some massive reset because we just can't survive this way. I mean,
well,
I think
it feels like we're getting close to that. I don't know, and I hope not that whatever does happen, I hope it's not too destructive. I think what we saw on the 6th was, whether it's associated with this or not, was kind of like the one bird that flies out of the cave that's like, oh, shoot. So I think that's the first thing. But yeah, I share the same opinion as you. I think that until, like, just with Wall Street and all the things of, essentially quarterly earnings and how drastically a stock price can fluctuate by that. Until we shift from that influence that then really is forcing companies to just do things to like pump either the profits, short term, stock price, all that stuff. Until we get away from those activities, like, I just don't know, and I don't know how far we can go with this. And so, one of the things that we are, as you heard the core values and all that, of course we want to encourage people to build great things and big things and change. But, what's really interesting about Founders Live, a bit more context here, we provide these experiences, events, and competitions, and they are 5 companies that get on stage and pitch in front of a crowd, and the crowd votes on the winner. And oh, by the way, guess which, more often than not, the ones that win as like the crowd favorite, they have like these undercurrent of incredibly purposeful aspects to them. They're not the ones that might make the most profit if you take it out 5-10 years, maybe not, but they're the ones where people are like, we need that. We absolutely need that. And so I think it's really amazing and cool to see that, look, the people talk with their, actions and their money or their clicks, but then it's like, on the Wall Street side, it's just like, what is the deal? And all on the finance side, is another story. So, we're really excited to see that what's bubbling up is a lot more purposeful entrepreneurs and startups, which is going to lead me to. Go ahead.
Well, that's we spend so much time trying to shift culture with the influencers we have, and when I'm just thinking about criminal justice reform, a lot of people didn't know that we were the most incarcerated country in the world until John got up on stage and won the Oscar for Glory with Common, and he said that. And I remember my mom calling and thinking that John was wrong, which was interesting because she's known him since he was 16. But she, even she was skeptical of the stat of we have, 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated. And so it's an interesting thing to kind of wake up and help culture shift. But we've seen that in a very short amount of time, just 5-6 years in criminal justice reform. And now we're electing progressive prosecutors. We're rethinking what we've done. People are much more aware of how racist the system has been. And I think we're seeing a lot of laws being passed in various states. And hopefully we'll continue to make a lot of progress. And so I have some optimism about things being able to shift very quickly, as long as people and society and our culture starts to really change our values and shift. And so, I do think we have to get very smart about rewarding and voting for us. I love that you're doing that, because people really do. They're waking up to say, like, it's not enough to just be successful. You have to give a shit. You have to care. You have to walk the walk. You have to do the right thing by the world. And I do think these younger generations are just like fully committed to that. And it's not satisfying to just, I've met some people in the music business who are considered like they made it, but they live alone in like a $50 million glass house in Beverly Hills, and like nobody's there. Like, that's not rewarding. I want to say, like, what if you went into South LA and helped like provide 3,000 jobs to the communities that don't have access to great jobs? Like, there's so much more satisfying, purposeful way to sort of live your life. And it sounds cliche because it's straight out of like the Scrooge Christmas special, but I think the more we work on that together and hold each other accountable for really helping each other out, leading with love, and not trying to kind of be caught up in so much greed, the better off we'll be. And that's a woman, that's me talking, who has a Wharton MBA from, a school that was all about maximizing bottom line profit. And so I've come around, from a dad who raised me, again, thinking that anything less than full on capitalism would be a slippery slope to the evils of communism, which was, his country was occupied, his uncle was killed under those regimes. So we haven't found the sort of ideal, perfect situation. And certainly the United States is more unique than a lot of European countries that I think take care of people better, in a large part because we are so vast and diverse, and we're not homogenous, and we haven't really kind of figured out how to be even all that united. So it's going to be quite a challenge, but I have to say, when I'm 46, so it's like I'm a mother of two, I'm one of the business leaders now, so I try to really think of what's my role, how do I do better, and what can I try to do within my limited amount of power to walk the walk, to change the norms. That's why I say yes to doing things like this, so that hopefully other people can see that you can be a manager and a leader and an innovator, but really lead with your heart, lead with vulnerability. There's a lot of great books out there, like Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, which encourage leadership to you can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. Embrace the suck. At the heart of daring leadership is a deeply human truth that is rarely acknowledged, especially at work. Courage and fear are not mutually exclusive. Most of us feel brave and afraid at the exact same time. We feel vulnerable, sometimes all day long. And it really kind of encourages us as leaders and entrepreneurs, I think, to show up with all our fear and vulnerability and lead with a more human approach. I remember thinking that wasn't possible when I started my company. I think being an entrepreneur really is so frightening, and you should get therapy if you're going to do it, because I remember thinking I was at the top of my game. I finally made it. And I was so scared to mess up and to be the people that I had seen fail me, that I thought it was sort of an impossible task, and I ran away from it. And then I realized, like, wait, I don't have to be what I've seen. I have to invent and start from scratch and do something better. And there have been a lot of tough nights and sleepless nights and fear and, what do I do and how do I do this better? So I do think I'm glad that you're encouraging entrepreneurs in that way to be mindful, to have their altar, to know what are their values, and to take care of each other more, because I didn't see a lot of that. I saw managers who kept me down. I saw managers who cut me out of the room. I saw managers who wouldn't share the profit or the revenue. I saw a lot of what I had to sort of have the courage to leave, thinking that I'd be blacklisted or out, just completely out of nobody would want to work with me because I didn't just do what I was supposed to do in certain environments in the music business. So I'm looking to the younger generations to really demand more and to then build their own infrastructure where they do more of what they hoped other leaders would do. And I've seen a few really inspiring entrepreneurs that are completely changing the way that compensation works and the way that transparency works in their companies and the way that they help each other out. I do say this, and I think it's somewhat radical, and we obviously have to live up to it. But I feel like my purpose in our company is to help everyone in the company live their best life.
Mm-hmm.
And I care about that more than anything else. And I think that when we do that, we have a manager this week who's planning a funeral, and we're all load balancing. She doesn't have to come to work at all. I think about how do we all love each other in our lives enough to take care of each other. Let us be great moms and dads, and let us be good friends. And then if we do all that well, there's such a good energy flow, and there's such a good commitment and love and trust with each other that it wears off on our artist partners. And then, artists that we work with start to see that you can do that. So you don't have to be a dad who's on the road and absent all the time. You can be home and be fully present with your children. Because I don't think artists should fall into the norms of what they've seen before either. We try to get people to meditate when they're anxious and learn new practices that'll help them connect to their creativity and to connect to the core of who they are. So if we walk that walk, then the artists and the impactors and the people we're working with, follow our lead too. And it's a community of all of us deciding, we're going to live this way. We're going to live we care about you living your best life as much as we care about ourselves living our best life. And it really does wear off, and it becomes sort of exponential, and I think how well it does for people.
I love that. And that falls right into first question that we'll take from Sophia. How do you keep focus and purpose in uncertainty and change? And how do you manage to move with love and compassion during challenging times, especially like this last year?
This last year we had to cancel a lot of tours. We were worried about revenue, but we didn't lay anyone off. We just stopped. We got rid of the expensive office, and we saved money by not having to pay for certain things like travel. We made a commitment to say we're going to get through this together, and I tend to keep a whole lot of revenue in reserve, so that worst case scenario, we lose a client or something like COVID happened, we're going to be okay for a good while. So you got to keep that money for weathering the storm. And then the other thing I think we've done over the years, we've really diversified our revenue. So we're not just kind of getting one kind of revenue that touring, and if it goes away, we're screwed. We have revenue from all different types of sources, different clients, different things. And so we're not sort of at risk of losing any one thing and then having to shut down the company. And I do the same thing for my artists. I really try to diversify their revenue streams so that all of our artists who had to cancel tours this year, they're still fine. They made it up in other ways. We made it up for them in other ways. So I do think it takes wise, smart, strategic business practices and planning and placing bets in numerous diversified ways to sort of weather the storm. But once you're in that, you know, that is the compassion and the love and the care that you've put in all along, so that even when something like this happens, you're fine. And you have such good relationships and friendships and partnerships that, you know, you can get other business opportunities from different places. But I did make that commitment. I didn't want to let anybody go, especially during this time. And I know a lot of companies that did. They cut costs. You know, the first thing they did was fire the staff that works in the restaurant, or the staff that they think of as low priority. And when I saw that, I was really disappointed. I mean, I get that there's a bottom line of dollars, but I thought to myself, couldn't the guys at the top just give up a little bit of their bonus and like couldn't they have just adjusted like the billions that they're used to make it slightly less, and then make sure that the custodial staff and the people who've been there behind the scenes, who need the money the most right now, are still taken care of through this time. We had a similar ethic with all of the touring. So even though the tours didn't happen, we really wanted to see all of the crew and the production staff and the people in the touring world that wouldn't be working still be taken care of. And so some of the bands we know like did, merch sales online and huge promotion to raise money for that, for their community of touring staff that typically kind of comes and goes based on whether you're touring or not. So we all kind of tried to pitch in to help each other through it.
Wow. Yeah. Look, no one knew. There was no playbook. And quite frankly, what you're saying is you led with the heart, you led with purpose, and just caring for your people. And it's surprising that there's not as many as I think we want in this world that would lead that way, but sounds like you did that. Madison has another question here. We're going to go to Madison's. This is great. I will probably drop some thoughts on this too. Do you think everyone needs an entrepreneurial mindset, or do we need those with more of an employee mindset to keep the business running smoothly? Interesting that you threw there's a dynamic there. What are your thoughts on people needing an entrepreneurial mindset versus what would be not that, and maybe an employee mindset, if there is a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the difference is. I'm not sure, because I haven't really I haven't read any. I think there is a book called The Entrepreneurial Mindset, but I haven't read it. So I don't know what the definitions are of either one of those. I think to me, they're all one and the same. Like, you have to have a mindset of your employees in order to be a good entrepreneur. At the second that I became a business owner and had employees, the most important part to me was and the most daunting and the most frightening part was that I had to pay the salaries of a number of people who trusted me enough to come with me. And that responsibility was, to be honest, at the time I was not in a vulnerable, good space. I started a company and I hadn't been in therapy for over a decade, and I thought I had solved all of the world's problems, and I thought I was the best and I knew what I was doing, and I was juggling it all, and I was just, it was like me against the world, and I was the best. If anything, I think my narcissism level creeped up the scale. And so I had to learn pretty quickly. I had a really tough first year. I really messed up. If I could go back, I would start that year over, and I would have been in the office, and I would have been caring, and I would have been getting therapy, and I would have been learning to meditate. But it took me a really tough year. And luckily, a lot of great people around me that helped me through it, to kind of get back into places of consciousness. I got therapy. I was working with Alicia Keys at the time, and she and her partner, Erica Rose, took me to a women's empowerment Kundalini yoga retreat. And I didn't want to go, but I went because I had to. But I was I just wasn't as conscious as I needed to be. But I went to that retreat, and 4 days later, I came back oh my gosh, I feel better than I felt in years. We all take on so much as entrepreneurs, and you want to be the one at the top that's untouchable, and like I thought I couldn't be vulnerable because that would be weak, and my employees would see me like not knowing what I was doing, and you feel that what's that called, that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a really scary place. I mean, we were fine actually, like nothing really went all that wrong, but I did lose a couple of friendships who were people that, you know, I was friends at work, and I was like, wow, I call myself friends at work, and I haven't really been friends to some of these people at my office. So, you know, I wouldn't blame any old client or employee for coming back and being like, you sucked like 5 years ago. So, you know, give yourself a break. It is really daunting. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, my advice to you would be go for it, but don't forget how to be a good person. Do the practices that require of you to show up and to know where your strengths are, but also where your stretches are. Know that you need to balance out your stretches with people on your team who have strengths that you don't have. Know that you could take that massive windfall of revenue and profit home for yourself, or you could set it aside to make sure that, you know, you're going to be able to keep all your employees no matter what happens for the next year. And bonus people really, really well. Give them as much as you can, and then more. The more you give, I swear to you, it's hard because you're like, just do it. Like, you don't need as much as you think you do, and other people need it more than you think they need. And this whole notion of like, and I see it again and again and again from the business managers and the lawyers and everybody, at least in the music business, like no one can understand how anyone would pay anyone anything unless you're like a famous musician. Like everybody else just is getting too much, and you know, it's like, no, we all deserve our value. We all deserve to do well, and let's all share in all of this, and let's compensate each other well, and make sure that people see a pathway towards having, you know, an increase in their annual salary. And that would just mean like a couple $1,000s. Like take someone from 50,000 up to 100, and then take them from 50 to 300, and then give them the back end, and then let them be the head of the management division, while you let go of control over things and stop trying to think you're the center of the universe. Let other people shine. And they'll stay with you. I mean, I left a lot of other people that I worked for because they didn't treat me well. So when I got there, I was like, my biggest nightmare was that people would leave me because I didn't treat them well. Then I was just becoming what the other people were. So you have to constantly push yourself to get into uncomfortable situations, have challenging conversations, but most importantly, do stuff for yourself, the work on yourself to know what emotional ups and downs you're going through, to deal with your own trauma, to deal with your own loneliness, to deal with whatever it is that's going on for you. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better be a conscious, good human being. And that usually happens because you have some practices that keep you tuned in, not distracted. You're not online 24/7, but you have a moment to connect with yourself. You have coaches. We hire coaches, and thank God for coaches, because when there's an issue or there's a bad thing going on, like we can all talk through with somebody who knows how to do that. Invest in those types of things for your teams, because it'll make you such a stronger team. And if you have a great team and you all know how to pass the ball and everybody's living their best life, everything else flows. Everything else works better.
And you mentioned imposter syndrome, and we have a question on that. And Danny Apples, I might know who Danny Apples is. I could take a guess, but Danny asks how to keep imposter syndrome at bay, especially as a woman entering or leading in a male dominant industry. Have you dealt with that, and how do you get through that?
You know, imposter syndrome is just another form of fear, which we all have. So sort of like, how do you deal with your biggest fears? And I guess as a mom, and I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, you know, when there's fear, like how do kids deal with, like, it's like, oh, you talk about it. You let it up and out, you admit it. I find that whenever I feel like, oh, I'm not good at this, or why would they want me to talk on their show? Or like how they're asking me to do this? Like, I don't know how to do that. You talk to your team and you admit that you're scared, and they're like, what? You can do it. We all need a manager, and my team are sort of my manager, and I'm their manager. And then my clients who are my artist partners sometimes are my manager, and I'm their manager. It's like, just bounce it off your people. Everybody deals with that, try not to let it overwhelm you. But in the early days, gosh, I don't know how I dealt with it, because that feeling of like everybody saw me as the assistant or the publicist, or like all these, nobody saw me as anybody with power. And in some ways, maybe that was helpful, because I kind of kept my head down and I did the work, and I didn't really need to be seen as much. And I don't know. I mean, I think eventually I decided I should be seen a little bit more, so that other people can see an example of, you can't become it unless you can't be it unless you can see it. So the only reason I sort of decided to like start speaking up louder and doing interviews and things like this is because I thought, well, I need to let other people see it. But you definitely, the first few times you do it, will feel like you're an imposter in a certain way, because it's just not normal. It's not something you normally do. You let other people take the credit. You let the men who are above you get all the money, and you let them get written up in Fast Company for being so-and-so's manager, even though you were their manager. And then, that doesn't feel so good. But women, we tend to get really used to that. We're like, oh, I don't care. I remember a manager I worked for, he was written up in huge articles like he's weathered the storm because he still has Meghan Trainor and John Legend, and he has all these great new clients, and those were my clients, and I was managing the clients, but my name was nowhere in this article. And he came and apologized to me, but nothing was changed, nothing was corrected, and it didn't matter. And I, of course, at the time was like, oh, I don't care. That's not what this is about, and you kind of, you put yourself down and you play humble, because more often than not, especially women, that's what we do. But I do want to encourage you to just like own it,
Well, what comes to mind is, and this kind of hit a little bit, but it's like, celebrate your wins, like take ownership of the good stuff that you're doing. And, imposter syndrome, I can speak to this a little bit. Look, I came into the tech industry. I didn't study technology. I am not technically, I'm not a technical, individual that builds and, writes code and builds products. I'm clearly on the other side of that team member type of situation. But, I'm in Seattle, and coming into the industry, I can tell you one thing, that I was looked at differently. I was treated a bit differently early on, because I didn't have the traditional background that the Seattle tech community has, or typically, and sitting across from an investor, and you're with your co-founder, and they look at you and say, well, where did you go to school? And then, okay, so my past is different, and so I had a lot of that too. It took me a while, and in the end, I was like, to be blunt, I was like, I'm just gonna put myself in the middle of the network, and I'm gonna surround myself with all the people. I'm actually gonna build the thing so that I kind of don't feel like that anymore. And I know that there's a lot more to my story, but in the end, I think my quick advice to anyone is, actually embody the great things that you're doing to the point where you realize you don't have to feel like imposter syndrome is simply, I don't belong here. Well, if you're actually doing things and you acknowledge it and you celebrate it in yourself, you now get over that, because you don't have the like, I shouldn't be here thought anymore. That it's an interesting thing, but it's a psychological step that you got to take.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the same in like relationships, celebrate each other. Like we make meaning out of this world. If you want to sort of feel good and have fun and enjoy your progress and kind of get there, you do kind of have to celebrate, love, and put yourself on a pedestal sometimes to a certain degree, and like really have each other's back. I also find, going back to your initial goal, sort of the more you do that for others, the more you'll be able to do that for yourself. There was a time where I was really stingy with things because I was so competitive and I was mad at everybody for not letting me be at the top. And I found that if I kind of stopped being stingy and gave, like, really let it go, you know, you're always going to feel like you were wrong in certain ways, but it's like, let it go and love other people as much as you can and give as much as you can. And there were some people who I barely knew who did that for me. Like sometimes, like, people who I met once or twice, but then on Twitter or through email were just constantly championing me, and being a cheerleader for me. And it for some reason it gave me confidence. And I think we should be championed for each other, like celebrating each other. I love that you created this because you allow, I mean, I don't know you, we haven't met before, but it's like now I get to sort of feel like I have this platform. It's a really generous thing for you to do that. And I do think being more generous leads to more, you know, they always say the thing that you wish you had is the thing you need to put out to the universe more. So if you want more love, like, give more love. If you want more money, give more money. Like there's those universal sort of themes, they hold true in a lot of, you know, they hold true in a lot of philosophy and religion in a lot of places. But we have another question.
Well, so Stacy asks, Stacy, good to see you on here. Thanks. Where do you want to see, or you know, what is the future of your company? Where do you want to see it going based on, you know, the ideals and the things that you talked about? So let's go out. Here's the way I actually asked this question. Let's go out 5 to 10 years. What is Friends at Work, and what does it look like?
I've been thinking so much about this because this is such a dreaming year. You know, we've all been so internal, and so it's a great time to be creative. I think there's an unmet need for infrastructure like management around people who are not just musicians, but really changing the world. So we've done a little bit in the impact space and impact management, managing Neil Katyal, Eric Harper, and we took a few steps towards that. And then I kind of halted it. COVID happened. There was some, you know, I didn't find the right people to partner with on it yet. So for me, creating an infrastructure around world leaders, you know, sports figures who are also engaged in social justice. Like I'm imagining managing just a roster of incredible leaders who need a team and haven't had a great team. There are a lot of people who have a great agent who's a little more transactional, or they have a manager who knows how to negotiate a sports contract, but they don't have a team that's helping them think about their biggest influence in the world. And so I've imagined like working with Serena Williams and Lewis Hamilton and Megan Rapinoe and a whole new slate of artists that know from the get-go that they have that they want to change the world in positive ways. Imagine creating a whole impact team around people like Sherilyn Ifill, who leads the legal defense fund for the NAACP. Just people like Rashad Robinson, who's a player of change. There's not a lot of places for those people to go and get like taken care of by a team. So for me, really building out more of the friend impact side of things is a big part. Also getting more into the storytelling and the culture change, because the more we tell the stories with film and TV and content, the more impact we can make, because it's art that goes into your heart and cracks it open and makes people want to change things. You can know the facts and figures about a particular issue, but not do anything about it. But if you watch a great docuseries or you get moved by a piece of art around it and it makes you sob, then you're more likely to feel connected to say, I need to do something in this space. So constantly thinking, how do we shift culture through content, storytelling? That's a big, big part of what we're doing, and we're going to keep investing in that. I also think spaces really matter. I mean, for as much as we've all pulled back and we're all working from home and we're not together, I want to own a place that is like a friends at work headquarters that also has stages and live music and community gatherings and theater and comedy. Like I'm ready to make an investment in that space, and it's something we're hoping. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm hoping that we own, a place that provides jobs, that helps people, and is a coming together space. So in 10 years, gosh, I mean, I've never imagined, like, I don't think about it in terms of revenue. Like, I don't want to be $100 million annual company. Like that freaks me out. I mean, I could be, but to me, that sort of feels like we'll have too many employees and no one will be close anymore.
Right.
Kind of want to stay just absolutely true to our values and keep walking the walk more and more and more. I want to affect more people positively. I want to provide, more steady, sustainable incomes for musicians and influencers and for my team, for my friends at work. I want all the mommies in my company and the daddies and the people who don't have kids and anybody else to just like know that they're safe and have a sustainable life and livelihood, and that they can maybe buy a house and have a backyard. I think about our success as like everybody I love and know, and that circle getting wider and wider. And then 10 years from now, we're all thriving. And we're leading with that heart-centered humanist approach. Maybe some of them go on to lead other companies. Maybe I hand over the keys. Part of me wants to just focus on my own artistry too. So I've been writing a book. I'm challenging myself to kind of say like, okay, what else could I do other than sort of, because running a company is a lot, right? So there's a part of me that just wants to become a painter and write my book and focus on my own healing and my own sort of artistry, while still supporting other people and loving other people. But I kind of like how in the a cappella group in college, when you graduated, you were sort of an alumni of the group, but the group lived on. So I think creating structures and companies where you can kind of leave it, but it still lives on and it does well for people, like that would be a nice goal of mine.
So I love where you're looking and growing. You're going to get there, I can tell. You just mentioned something though that it really makes me think, like, are you the type of person, do you think you're going to be able to step away? Or are you the type of person that, look, I'm in for my life. And it's because you have a purpose and a direction that you want to make this impact. So do you think you could actually step away?
I think I could. I really do. I think it's helpful and useful to sort of shift your life in ways that require, you don't want to get too addicted to the nonstop entrepreneurial lifestyle. I think that can be, I want to be able to slow down and spend a little more time on just one or two things. And I'm striving for that even now. How do I let go of control, empower more people, and let other people make the call? And I want to teach other people to sort of, you don't need me on that call. You got this. So yeah, I think I'm more of an introvert than people even know. And there is a part of me that just, I pushed myself into this space and I did it. And I'm not really even fully aware or conscious of why. Some of us would say that they're still just trying to like please their parents. Like a lot of people I think would say that Beyonce is still working as hard as she was working so hard because she just wanted the love of her father. And in a lot of ways, I went to business school and I started a company and I'm doing a lot of this because it's what my dad wanted me to do. Or it's what I knew would like please him, right? So it's like finding, beyond this and the money making and the company making and the, sort of like what would it look like to live in a more, less email, less text messages, less things to do, but still being really impactful. I think I'll always want to make a positive impact on the world. but I'm not sure I need to be on stage for that long. And I don't think I'm going to be addicted to the nonstop cycle of it. I like being not busy. I like sleeping in, and I like reading a book, you know.
Yeah.
And those are things that go by the wayside when you know, having a company and being an entrepreneur is a lot like having a newborn. You don't sleep as much as you'd like to, you know.
Yeah. We have another question that this is going to be great because I think that, you know, there's a backstory here. The question is, what would you say to the girl who got off the plane and changed her career the next day? And what would you tell her now about the future? So really this is like going back to your past self. If you could give a little context to this question, I think people will appreciate it.
Yeah. So Raina, I guess, knows about my near-death experience that made me quit my big kind of public company job. So I graduated from Wharton Business School, and I did what every good recent MBA graduate does. I got into consulting, and I started telling other companies with PowerPoints and spreadsheets and you know, what I think their company should do. And you learn a lot in those environments. And then I left the consulting firm to work for a company called Ascent Media, which is part of a broader, bigger public company called Liberty Media. And I worked for a CFO, and I did, you know, 5-year strategic planning, and I would present to the board. And I wore a suit every day, and I worked till 2 a.m. and my back was like hunched over, and I hadn't done a yoga class or anything. And I was just living that very professional life. And then I was on a plane flying from Seattle to Los Angeles the day after Christmas. And I was on an Alaska Airlines flight in 2005. And we were up at about 27,000 feet. And I looked out over snowy Mount Rainier. And all of a sudden, at that moment, a loud pop opened up, like a loud bang happened in the plane. And then the next thing, you know, wind was rushing through the plane and your ears were popping. And I was sitting next to someone, and I was like, what's going on? Are we going down? And then the mask came down, and everybody had to put their masks on really quickly. And you could just tell no one had any idea. The flight attendants had no idea what was going on. The pilot had no idea. All we knew is that we had a rapid depressurization, and the plane was going down, and the plane felt very unstable. And I thought to myself, this is how it ends. This is that moment that you dread. And I wasn't so much sad, I was angry, which is a funny thing to reconcile. Like, I was angry in that moment. I was so mad that I hadn't lived my life. And I was furious that I hadn't done what I was more passionate about, what I thought I could do, that I hadn't lived up to my own expectations for myself, that I hadn't had married this man next to me, that I hadn't had kids yet, that I hadn't lived a full life. And I couldn't believe it was being sort of taken away from me. And I made this promise to God that if we landed, if we survived, I wouldn't squander another day, that I would get to the business of doing what I was passionate about, that I wouldn't hesitate as much, that I would live more fully, that I would be more present, that I would, you know, that I would get going, that there wasn't much time, and that I didn't realize that until that moment. And we had an emergency landing, and there were ambulances and fire trucks, and we made it back. I think once the plane got down under 10,000 feet, it stabilized, and the pilot came on and said, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a rapid depressurization. We're going back. And we flew so low to the ground, and we ended up making it back to SeaTac Airport. And everybody cried and clapped, and it was all over the news. And it turned out that a baggage handler had hit the plane with the baggage cart, and the fuselage is so sensitive that when it got up to a higher altitude, it just, a 3-foot hole opened up in the side of the plane. So that week I went in and quit my job, and I kept my promise. And then I was lost and I didn't know what to do with my life. I was kind of traumatized and sort of depressed. But I went into the CFO, and even though it was like a $250,000 a year job, I was like, I gotta go. This is not what I need to be doing. And they understood. But I started calling some friends, and one of my close friends was John Stevens, who had become John Legend. In 2005, he put out his very first album, Get Lifted. Actually put it out right at the end of 2004. So by this point, he had about, I don't know, maybe a year of success. And he said, why don't you come to New York? I was living in LA at the time. And he was like, why don't you come to New York and we'll whiteboard what we could do together. And that's how it began. Within a year, we started John Legend Ventures, and that led to eventually becoming his manager. And
God, that's great.
I'm really glad I went through it. But what would I say to that girl as she gets off the plane? I would say, don't be afraid. You're gonna keep taking those steps towards what you're tuned into, what you're passionate about, what you need. Don't compromise it. Don't think that you can't be, just like show up and believe in yourself. And also don't forget, even when you get into the place of success and space of like complacency or the same space that you were in when you were going up on the plane, like always commit to living that life as if it could be gone tomorrow. Make those decisions based off of like that bigger universal theme of what really matters. It's such a good question. I want to think about it longer because that's the kind of question I could meditate on for 3 hours and still add to it. But I love that.
It's so good. And it's, what I am thinking is, why does it take something like that to shake you into focus? Did you, or would you have made this decision if that plane did not have that situation? I'm willing to bet that your path would have somehow arrived. You would have taken a slightly different road, but you would have arrived. But why does it take things like that to be like, you know what? You had these really clear thoughts. You were frustrated. You were mad. And you said, I need to live my life with stronger purpose and what I really want to do. Why does it take a plane almost crashing?
I think at the time I was so afraid of failing. I mean, it was sort of like I had so much to lose because I had the MBA. I was in debt. I wanted to please my father, my immigrant father. I wanted to be successful. And it was like, how could you possibly throw away what you have for something that you don't even have yet? And then having that kind of moment like highlights faith. It highlights a sense of there's something bigger than all of this. And it makes the fear of losing that existence, which you're not even all that happy in, it makes the fear of losing that feel so small compared to the fear of losing your life. And I think, I'm getting sorry. I think that that's the hard part about, I think certain musicians have this too. It's sort of the ones who can kind of like the people who really risk it all. You have to take some big risks if you want to live big. You have to kind of like, and that fear that I had on that plane was so massive that nothing compared to it. And it gave me the courage to do something that I'd wanted to do for a while. I mean, I remember being unhappy in those jobs and knowing like, how did I wander into this space? I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I love, creative enterprises. I like working in small little a cappella groups that are basically little entrepreneurial ventures. But I was so afraid of not doing the right thing and losing what I had. It took this fear of losing my life to wake me up to go, wait a second. Don't you want to live it like you're happy and enjoying it? Even if you're not going, and that's honestly, I played it safe too often. So remembering to actually go for it and have some faith and to create a huge vision for yourself. Some might call it delusional, but I do think if you reach for it and you go there and you take some risks, you have a bigger shot. I can only speak for myself. I'd hesitate to give that advice sometimes to other people because I remember when John was going to leave BCG Consulting, he had such a good job, right? And he was one of my closest friends, and he didn't have anything to fall back on. It wasn't like he came from any money or had it, he had no way of supporting himself if he didn't make any music. But he told me right as I was going to work business school that he was going to quit the job at BCG and try to make it in music. And I actually told him at the time, "You're crazy. Nobody makes it in music. You should stay at BCG. Why would you do that? It's against all odds." And I was being really smart. I was listening to what my father would tell me. But John thought I was crazy to go to business school because he was like, "You're so creative. Why are you going into those environments?" So we really didn't, we were in completely different sides of our life at that point. And he took the risk and he believed in himself and it worked out. And I went to business school. And it took a near-death experience on a plane to make me quit that thing and go be my version of, the musician on stage. I probably was never going to be the one like touring the world as a musician because that just, honestly, I wasn't that good of a singer. So I was clear enough to know that like my strengths were maybe not best suited to become an international superstar. But I did take the leap in terms of giving up the big salary and going for a more entrepreneurial path. And there were many times when I was like, what am I doing? But I was happier and I was more of my own boss and I was doing things with people I loved and I felt very close to the creative process and I got to, along the way. And by the way, 4, 5, 6 years into it, I still wasn't making anywhere near what I was making back when I was at Ascent Media. So a lot of people in my life were like, "What did you do? And why did you bet on this guy? And where did you, especially my parents," right? So it took a long time to get the return on the investment. But now I'm so grateful I did it. I'm so grateful. And I don't know if I would have without that moment. It just made it so clear that like this one wild life, you have to live it to the fullest.
Wow. Yeah, it's obviously a emotional thing, and just so special. And I think your story is so great. I really like it.
Thanks. Thank you. I mean, it's funny to tell your story. I mean, and even just to have enough confidence to like share your story. I'm still trying to understand my own story. I think writing a book feels like it's going to be helpful because you can spend a little more time with it and unearth it. But that is another reason I think all people should go to therapy. You get in therapy every week, you commit just for 1 hour, just telling your story, talking about your feelings, getting to know yourself. A lot of us don't do that.
Oh,
you think you're doing it with like a loved one, friend, whatever, but it's not the same. You get into therapy and you're dealing with yourself.
Oh, let me tell you. So side story for everyone here. Clubhouse has some interesting conversations and people. But we were on there a couple weeks ago, and I was in this room, and guys, people are asking questions, and we're going through some stuff. I'm up on stage, and people are asking me questions, and this question comes up. This guy ends up bringing up like whether or having to go to therapy or not, and I just like stopped him, and I was like, "No, you look. I've got like two therapists and a coach around me. I've got a lot of people around me, but like I have 2 therapists, by the way, and a coach. And I said, it is the best thing. I said, if you are a founder and entrepreneur, you absolutely need it's not going to therapy, it's having people around you that you can then talk to and you can learn about yourself and you can, they help you see things, hear things, identify things that your family and your other partners and, you know, business partners shouldn't be doing. And I said, you're 100% needing to, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to bring those people around you, because that's how you grow. And so I definitely support what you're saying. And it's like, look, everyone should have a therapist, because that's how we heal. And I'm right in the middle of it right now. I'm going through the craziest growth curve of my life. And I'm like, I'm learning about things in my youth and my childhood that I'm totally didn't even see, yet thought that was fine. Like my growing youth and growing up was fine. My parents did get divorced, but now you start to look at and say, that's why I do some of the things that I do. And you then accept those things about yourself and start to really grow around who you are as a person in general, and not think that you're any sort of, you know, damaged goods, or I don't know, like I'm not going to go down too far that road, but as an entrepreneur or a creative artist, very, very, very important to bring these people around you as your team to support you and help you grow. So definitely.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad that you preached that. And I mean, look, I used to feel bad because I was like, I'm proselytizing something that might not be right for everybody. And do it in however you do it, but just make sure you have a practice where you're really being conscious. Some people don't like therapy, but they're really good at Kundalini meditation. And some people don't like Kundalini meditation, but they love just a different kind of meditation, or they go to church, or whatever is your thing, but like put in a practice of consciousness and
Yes.
self-awareness. You know, it could be with a coach, it could be with and different things work for different people. And I've tried so many different, I mean, I started out when I was 21 going to the Landmark Forum because a boyfriend of mine was going, and I was like, I need to go, you know, like, and that helped me kind of get into this notion of like, what is it to be human? But also read books, take time to breathe when you wake up, put your feet on the ground, have a practice in the morning. So many entrepreneurs I know are, you know, they're just like going 24/7 and they're on social media, and I'm not sure if they're really taking good care of themselves, which is why we need more management companies and teams where we're all walking the walk, helping each other be our best selves, and helping each of us as we do the most things we can do in our life and in the world to care about us as human beings, to care about our well-being, to care about our mental health, to make sure we're eating right, we're getting enough sleep. These things matter more than anything else.
Yeah.
And you can have that relentless drive, and you can become incredibly successful, and you can be deeply, deeply unhappy, and deeply, deeply like without purpose and without love. And you know, it's just like you've got to have the holistic perspective on your life. And again, for me, I mean, I just say like, Kundalini yoga has helped tremendously, and therapy and coaches, you know, and I'm privileged enough to be able to afford all these things. But you know, there's some things that don't cost much at all that'll help you still get in touch with yourself. If you can't do that, if you can't sit with yourself and be present and write or read a book, chances are you're running away from something.
Yeah.
You're not, you have a lot to explore. If you can't stop, if you also don't have a practice of crying frequently and feeling your emotions, that's a sign that you've got some stuff that you're running away from. And where better to hide than in being an entrepreneur or being a musician, you know? Make sure you're really digging in the dirt of yourself, that you're feeling your feelings. Look, that's not easy. A lot of people can't do it. If you're just getting started or you don't even know where to begin, just make a weekly appointment with someone.
Yeah.
I promise you it will lead to so many things that you can't even imagine, right? I mean, you know, you're going through it.
Well, and what comes to mind is so a coach that I don't work with personally, but I listen to a podcast and I quote him a lot, is Jerry Colonna at Reboot, and incredible team. And I mean, their podcast is amazing, but he has a story about walking into the fire. And I'm not going to go into all the details. You can search Jerry Colonna and walking into the fire. But the short of the story is there's like a potter, and just the artist potter is basically in process of trying to create the ultimate perfect creation. And to do that, he's got this like big fire that he puts the thing in, and basically he ends up walking into the fire. The lesson here is that he gave it all and gave his entire life to then create the most amazing pot in the world. And the fact of the matter is that we as entrepreneurs and creators can very easily slip down a path or slip down the cliff of literally losing our identity of our person, only trying to create the best product or company or brand, and yet we don't even realize that we're losing our life. We are literally losing your humanity and time with your family, your friends, your life, your significant other, your external world that is much more than your company. And trust me, this is the stuff I'm talking about with my coaches right now. Is like, it's counterintuitive that the moment you more realize, it's counterintuitive that you let go of the company, be more of a human being, and that thing will thrive and you're a better person. It's the craziest thing. So for anyone on this, like, think about it. You might be gripping the wheel too tight. I've been there. I have, I'm working through that. But walking into the fire, don't walk in the fire. Don't let your life go to the trying to just build the best company possible and best app that you can, when you don't realize that your life is still there. Yeah.
That is so much truth. And I've had musicians who pretty much do the same exact thing. They put everything into creating the best songs and the best art, and then they lost everything. They lost their careers, they lost their loved ones, because they got a New York Times article written about how much of a total asshole they are, and how many women they've hurt, and how many people they've messed up, and how manipulative they are. And and it's heartbreaking, because we're talking about like some of the greatest artists of our time, but
Yeah.
it's over because they forgot how to be a good person. And they didn't honestly care, because they cared only about their legacy with the best songs, the best music, and the best touring, but they didn't care about how they treated people around them. And that happens in every industry, in every world, entrepreneurs, musicians, tons of people. And you're so right. And I've had one of those musicians reach out to me years later, and he just apologized in every way. I was like, I wish I had actually seen people more around me and loved them more. Now, that also went hand in hand with addiction, but that's what happens when you're like suffering and you're self-medicating through all those other ways to avoid the reality of what you're going through. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're also caught in addiction, which a lot of people can't see when they are, that's a whole other big, quick way of just destroying it all. So yeah, spend a lot of time, prioritize being a good person, prioritize yourself and your life and your consciousness, and you giving to others and taking care of other people. I swear to you, it's a way better way to live your life than just making the pot that is the best. I love that. I'm going to go look that up. How do you spell? Is it Colonna?
Colonna, Colonna, I believe. I'll double check and send it to you.
Okay.
He's awesome. I mean, the Reboot podcast, if you just search that too, pretty sure I've listened to all of them, and there's like hundreds, because it goes back 5 or 6 years. But sadly to say, we are coming to the end, and geez, we did not get to it, all the stuff. I mean, there's so much that I wanted to go in with you, and we've talked about a lot of things from the group, but want to be respectful of your time. And so, we are going to close up for today, but I have a feeling that, this is probably not the last conversation, and I really appreciate your time. There you go, taking that picture.
It's been so fun. I really, this was a really good, deep conversation, and I really enjoy watching all the comments pop up.
Yeah.
Thanks for all those really deep, insightful questions. And I mean, I could go all night. But I do have 2 kids that I need to go
I know.
get to bed. But thank you so much. This is awesome. And
You're welcome.
Listen to the podcast and tune into more of these, because it's really useful. And it's nice to have a community of founders, because you can often feel really alone trying to do it.
Oh yeah. That's why we started it. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here and sticking around. Obviously the energy and just everything tonight was amazing. So should we just throw in the website information? Where can people come find a little more about Friends at Work?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, you can just you can go to friendsatwork.com, or just follow me on Instagram and Twitter and DM me, and let's talk. We have a 40-person company. We're based in LA. We have a couple team members in the UK, but we are growing. And if we open this venue, we'll be in the live music space, and we'll be hiring in Los Angeles, and there's all sorts of things. So I don't think this is a huge group. So I'm guessing there's a lot of people on here that might really sync with what we're up to. Especially if you're an incredible, friendsatwork.com, right there. If you are really into social impact work and social justice, but you also have a deep appreciation and experience in entertainment, in storytelling, and film and TV, I am really looking for the right team members and partners to think through how do we better manage the social impact leaders of our time, people who are holding up our democracy, changing the world, trying to fix some of the biggest issues. They need good infrastructure, and it can't just be agents. So if you have that kind of experience, please find us, send us your resume. If you want to partner, you run something like that already, I'd love to get to know you. And yeah, just find me. I'm sure you guys could, we'll hopefully, I'm sure the ones that we're supposed to connect will connect. It just seems like this is a real like-minded space, which is cool. And good luck with all you founders out there. You're on the plane, you're ready to take the leap, you want to do it, do it. So you don't need the hole to open up. I'm telling you, just make the leap and believe in yourself and keep going.
Thank you, Ty. Tys Stiklorius, Friends at Work, touching conversation. Let's stay close. And I think I told you this before, but this is now, these sort of experiences and conversations are now going to be a lot more frequent. And I think I told you this, but we're excited to see the direction with Facebook and things that are being created right now. So keep that in mind, and would love to just stay in touch.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And just so if you all saw, we are opening a space, and I know, Ty, you got to go, obviously, but we're opening a space. It's called Kumo Space, and it's going to allow us to all be able to chat and even see each other on camera. So if anyone wants to hang out, I'm going to kick it there for a while. I'm probably going to grab a little glass of wine and hang out. So please, if you all want to hang out and see everyone else, let's do that. But for tonight, thank you all, Founders Live. This has been Founders Live Conversations, and man, just a beautiful time.
Thanks so much.